So you've just spent hours getting the perfect vocal recording, but when you drop it inside the mix, it just feels thin, you can't hear all the lyrics, and when you turn it up, it just sounds harsh. Today we're going to fix all of that, and I'm going to show you 3 vocal mixing mistakes to avoid if you want to get your vocals sounding upfront and professional inside the mix. Before we dive in here though, if you're looking to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF guide that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the guesswork. Completely free for you to download, and you can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at this vocal. I'm going to start as per usual here by playing you the vocal inside the mix here so you can hear how our finished vocal is sounding against the rest of the track.
Well, yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one that's ever known how to make me wanna live like I wanna live now.
So you can hear, even though there's a lot of stuff going on in this song, lots of guitars, an organ, bass, full drum kit, we can still hear our vocal clearly over everything that's going on. So let me take off all the processing here, and I'll give you a glimpse of the raw vocal inside the track, and then I'll solo it up by itself as well.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down.
You can hear it's a good vocal performance. It's a good capture of a vocalist doing their thing. But when we tuck it inside the mix here, it's very dynamic. We can't hear all the lyrics. And as we crank it up to make sure we can hear everything, it gets a little bit harsh and it gets a little bit pokey. So let's kind of walk through the processing here. And I'm going to show you the mistakes to avoid to make sure your vocal isn't thin and isn't harsh and that you can hear everything that's going on. Let me turn on this first EQ. First thing I'm always doing here is throwing on a high pass filter. Just got this rolled up to 195 hertz here, 12 dB per octave slow. This is the first thing I'm always throwing on a vocal. So I'll hit play here and we'll kick this in. You can hear how it changes our vocal tone.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one.
So it's starting to attack probably the first thing that most people hear when they listen to an isolated vocal like this. When you listen to an isolated vocal recording like this by itself, soloed out, it sounds muddy, it sounds kind of boxy in the mid-range here, and usually the first thing that people do is they try and attack this low-mid area to get some extra clarity on the vocal and to make it sound less muddy and boxy or nasally here in the mid-range. That's not something I'm doing these days. And I think it's usually people's first mistake is thinning out the vocal too much in the mid-range here. So all I'm doing reduction wise here on the vocal with the EQ is I'm just rolling off some of the sub area and cleaning up some of this lower mid-range area without pulling out a bunch of information here. So listen one more time and then I'll show you what it sounds like if we were to go in and trim out some of this low mid area. So take a listen without the high pass and then with.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the...
You can hear we're not making a huge tonal change on the vocal with the high pass. All we're doing is cleaning up some of the sub area on things like P's and B's to make sure they don't really jump out and give us this blast of air coming out of our vocal. Usually what people end up doing though is coming in and kind of pulling out a whole bunch of 200, 300, 400 here on the vocal to try and get rid of the muddiness that's going on in the low mids. So take a listen to what that sounds like if I come in here with this EQ filter and start trimming out some of this 300 hertz area.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good.
So we've got about a 3 dB cut here at around 286, and it seems to have pulled out some of the muddiness or the boxiness on our vocal. It gave us some clarity, but listen to how thin our vocal sounds now with just this 3 dB cut in the low mids. I'll A-B this for you. Listen to how thin our vocal feels with this cut in.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one.
To me, it just sounds so much better without that cut in. And I think the first mistake people make when they're mixing vocals is they mistake this muddiness in the mid-range for something they have to pull out, when actually it's a lot of the lower end power on the vocal that you need. So people usually think the vocal is muddy or boomy or boxy, when in reality the vocal is just dark. And you can see what I'm actually doing here on this vocal EQ-wise is I'm boosting some top end. So take a listen to hear what that sounds like. So instead of cutting bottom end here or low mids, we're going to boost some top end.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one that's ever known how to make me wanna live like I wanna live now. I said, yeah, yeah.
So that's a little bit much right now by itself. There's some controlling factors we'll get to down the line, but the philosophy here at the beginning stage of mixing your vocal is if you're chasing clarity on the vocal, don't go searching for muddiness or boominess to try and cut. Just simply add some clarity and add some brightness on the top end. If it's clarity you want, add some clarity. If it's boominess that's there, go cut the boominess. But I feel like people's first mistake a lot of the times is mistaking the lower mid-range for something bad and something negative, when a lot of the times it's the weight and power in the bottom end that you need to make sure your vocal doesn't feel thin inside the track. I'm going to take this top end boost off for a second because that's not where I'm usually putting it in the process. It usually comes a little bit later in the process. So the first thing I'm doing here on the vocal is just the high pass. Moving on to the next piece of the puzzle here, we have our compressor. The second mistake I feel like most people are making, and it usually seems to be more when you're a beginner, sometimes when you're an intermediate and you're mixing vocals, is you seem to be afraid to compress the vocal. There's a lot of stuff out there. Don't overcompress your vocal. Don't do a lot of compression on your vocal. And sometimes there's these magic numbers thrown out like, oh, just like 3 dB of compression or just 5 dB of compression on your vocal. Where if we zoom out and look at this vocal, it's very dynamic, and 3 dB of compression or 5 dB of compression is not going to sit this vocal properly inside the track. So I'm going to hit play here, and I'm going to click on this compressor. I've got the attack at about 0.55 milliseconds. The release is at 50 milliseconds, 4:1 ratio here. Watch how much compression we're doing on this vocal to get it sitting inside this track. I have it soloed up here, but I'll drop it inside the mix as well.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel.
You can see we're doing about 7 to 10 dB reduction here on this vocal, because looking at some of these peaks, That's what's needed. That's what it takes to get this vocal evened out and to park it in one place inside the track. If you don't do enough compression on your vocal, you're still going to have these big peaks and these big valleys in your vocal that when you try and level it inside the track, you're going to hear some phrases and some phrases are going to disappear under the rest of the instrumentation. So the mistake here is not compressing your vocal enough. Sometimes 7 to 10 dB reduction is what you need to get your vocal sitting right inside the track. If you have a more even vocal performance volume-wise going in, you don't need this much compression. But if you have these bigger peaks, if you have these louder phrases and these quieter phrases, sometimes this is the amount of compression you need. 7 dB of compression, 10 dB of compression to hold your vocal in one spot. So when you park the fader where you want it, the vocal stays even, it sits on top of the track, and you can hear all the lyrics. One more time here. 0.55 milliseconds on the attack. So pretty fast attack. It's medium slow for this unit, but it's still very, very fast in general. We're under a millisecond, 4-to-1 ratio, so we can really target some of these bigger peaks here. And then a 50 millisecond release, so fastest release from this unit. We want to get in, we want to grab those peaks, and then we want to let go so the quieter phrases can come up and even out against the louder phrases. So without the compressor and then with it.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down.
So you can see on that louder phrase right there, this big peak in our vocal, we're doing 10 dB reduction there. But if we look at the rest of the vocal phrases around it, we're doing that maybe 3, maybe 5 dB reduction. So if all of our vocal looked like this right here, or if all of our vocal looked like this right here dynamically, then yeah, 3 dB reduction, 5 dB reduction would be fine on our vocal. But if we go from something like this to something like this volume-wise on our vocal, then we need more compression to hold our vocal in place. So that's the second mistake I see most people making, is not compressing their vocal enough, and they have these huge dynamic jumps in the vocal, and you can't hear all of the lyrics. You can't hear the full performance that the vocalist gave you. So now we'll come back here and we'll click our top end boost back in. So here's how our vocal is sounding at the moment.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one that's ever known.
So now we've got clarity on our vocal. It's not thin because we didn't scoop out any of the low mids there. Our vocal is super even because we did enough compression on it. But as we pull it up here, it kind of feels harsh and it feels pokey. We've set the vocal where we want it volume-wise. If we dump it inside the track here, it sits on top of the mix, but it feels kind of brittle, it feels kind of pokey, and it feels a little bit harsh.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good.
You can hear there's some ringing up in the high mids, and it's a little bit harsh, it's a little bit edgy up there. The last mistake I see people making is that they get their vocal primed like this. They get it pulled up inside the track, and they get it up front and on top, but it's so loud in the high mids that it comes across harsh. So the last thing that you need to do on your vocal is you need to attack the high mids. You need to control the energy up there. We've boosted the high end to get some clarity, but after you do a boost in the top end or in the high mids, you need to control that area so it never gets too much for the listener. And the first thing we're doing here, this isn't so much high mid control as it is sibilance control, but I'm going to throw in the de-esser here. I like using this multi-band here. It gives me a little bit more flexibility to actually control some of the high mids as well as attack the sibilance range. So we're looking at 3K and above here on the vocal. This is post our compressor. 20-to-1 ratio, fast attack, fast release. So we're getting in as quick as possible and we're getting out as quick as possible to control any peaks or any pokiness in the sibilance range here. So 3K and above on our vocals. Here's without, and then I'll click it in.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down.
So you can see mostly just taking care of any excess sibilance we have on this vocal. And actually, the nice thing about this vocal performance is there wasn't a lot in terms of heavy sibilance coming in on this vocal recording, so we didn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting here with this. I have an EQ at the end of the chain here. It's not actually doing anything on the vocal. This is sometimes, if I do end up cutting in the low mids here, sometimes I'll come back at the end of the chain and add some bottom end back to the vocal, but we didn't cut anything in the low mids. Our vocal isn't feeling thin, so we don't need to add any weight there. But on the bus, so the lead vocal and the harmony are coming into the bus here, is where I'll put soothe. And this is where I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting to get rid of any harsh frequencies in the high mids here. And I'm just looking at 2K and above here. A lot of the work is going to be going on around this 4K area. So I have the depth dialed up to about 2, but I have the sharpness all the way up. So I don't want to have these huge dips in the high mids on the vocal. I want it to be pretty much like notches, coming down. Any frequencies that get too much, we're going to notch them out, and then it's going to get out of there as fast as possible. So same philosophy as our compressor, getting in as fast as possible, and then getting out. And if you don't have something like Soothe, I know Soothe is a little bit more of an expensive plugin. I do have a little bit of manual correction afterwards that I'll show you, and you can just do it all the way with manual as well. So take a listen here without Soothe and then with it.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good.
So now our vocal feels bright, it feels like it has some weight, but all of that mid-range harshness that was making our vocal feel too loud and feel like it was poking through and kind of edgy to listen to is gone. We've pulled all of that out here with Soothe in the mid-range. Like I said, mainly focusing on this like 4K area. Usually that's where I find most of the harshness or the edginess is on vocals, from like this 2K to 8K area, but I let Soothe run all the way up, so if there's any kind of sibilance that does jump through past 8K, it'll catch some of that as well, but mainly focusing around this 4K area to get rid of those frequencies that are poking out, that are ringing out on the vocal. And if you don't have something like Soothe, which is okay, you can do it the manual way, which is the way I used to do it before I had Soothe, and we're just taking the Q up on our EQ filters all the way. So they become these really, really narrow notch filters, and all you got to do is boost up, sweep around until you find them. There were a couple that Soothe didn't catch or didn't pull out enough, and I don't like pulling Soothe up too much on the depth because it kind of gets weirdly hollow sounding. It's kind of the downside of some of those automatic tools like that. So I do still do some manual correction here with EQ on the end to get rid of any harsh frequencies, so we make sure our vocal sits on top of the mix without being edgy or pokey to the listener. So I've got 3 cuts here: 3.51K, 7.47K, and then 3.95K. These are all the way up on the Q, so very, very narrow filters, and they're all just pulled down by about 12 dB. So take a listen without this EQ, and then I'll click it in.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one that's ever known how.
You can hear it's a subtle shift with this last EQ because Soothe is doing a lot of the heavy lifting beforehand, but it gives the vocal this extra smoothness. So no matter where we park it volume-wise, if you have someone that's cranking your mix up really, really loud through some bigger speakers, the vocal is never going to feel harsh. It's going to stay smooth, and it's going to stay up front on top of the track. So let's throw our vocal back inside the mix here and see where it's sitting against the rest of the track.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good good as I feel right now. Baby, you're the only one that's there. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down.
Vocal is up front, it sits on top, we can hear every single lyric that's being sung here. It's not too dynamic, it's not harsh, and most of all, it isn't thin inside the rest of the track. It competes against everything else that's going on. Let me do one more A-B here. I'll A-B all the processing going on the vocal by itself, and I'll do it inside the track as well here.
Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good. But yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good. Yeah, I might have chased a couple women around. All that ever got me was down. Yeah, then there were those that made me feel good, but never as good as I feel right now.
Let's review 3 vocal mixing mistakes that are ruining your vocal mixes. The first one is trimming out too much of the low mids on your vocal on the way in. Don't mistake the low mids on the vocal here for muddiness or boominess on the vocal, when in reality, they're the low end power on your vocal, and it gives your vocal the weight it needs to not feel thin inside the track. Remember, if you're chasing clarity on your vocal, add clarity. Don't cut weight. Add clarity. All right. Vocal mixing mistake number 2 is not compressing your vocal enough. Sometimes when you're starting out, I get it. It's scary to do a lot of compression on your vocal, but if you have these big peaks and these big valleys on your vocal, sometimes 7 dB, 10 dB reduction is what you need to get your vocal even. If you don't do enough compression on your vocal, it's not going to sit evenly inside your mix, and you're not going to hear all of the lyrics that are being sung by the vocalist. Mixing mistake number 3 is not controlling the high mids and not controlling the harshness on your vocal. You get your vocal even, you get it loud inside the mix, but you don't control the harshness. Nobody's going to listen to your track if you get your vocal loud and it's super, super harsh. So we're using Soothe here to do a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the automatic notching, and then following it with an EQ to pull out anything left that is harsh here in the high mids, so we can get our vocal up front and on top of the mix, and it sounds very, very smooth to our listener. I hope that was helpful for you. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. You can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.